So hi, I'm Rune, first of all, and I'd like to say to everyone out there, Happy New Year. Um, right, okay. As most of my friends out there in Facebook land know, I love to read. I love books. I love everything about books. My house is pretty much like its own library. Yeah, I have books everywhere. And one of my favorite memories growing up was when my mom used to read to me. It made me feel safe. It was a great way to connect with her and to just end my day and wind down. It was perfect. And I don't know, um, like, how many of you read with your parents or have that as a memory, but for me, it's a positive thing. And so, to start off, I'm going to start, at the start of a new year, as a new thing for me, I'm going to start reading to you, my Facebook friends. I have all manner of books. I'm going to try and keep the selection light. I'm not going to read anything too heavy. The first book will be The School for Good and Evil. By 2 seconds, guys. It's by Soman, SomanChainani. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, and I apologize to the author if I am pronouncing it horribly wrong. Right. This book is a young adult book. A dark fantasy adventure, perfect for girls who prefer fairy tales with a twist. Every 4 years, 2 girls are kidnapped from the village of Gabaldon. Legend has it, these children are sent to the School for Good and Evil, the fabled institution where they become fairy tale heroes or villains. Sophie, the most beautiful girl in town, has always dreamed of her place at the School for Good, while her friend Agatha, with a dark disposition, seems destined for the School for Evil. But when the two are kidnapped, they find their fortunes reversed. So that's the synopsis. So in this book we're going to meet Sophie and Agatha, and we're going to see what happens to them. Chapter 1 starts, In the forest primeval, a school for good and evil. 2 towers like twin heads, one for the pure, one for the wicked. Try to escape, you will always fail. The only way out is through a fairy tale. Sophie had waited all her... The first chapter is called The Witch and the Princess. Sophie had waited all her life to be kidnapped. Tonight, all the other children of Gavaldon arrived in their beds. If the schoolmaster took them, they'd never return. Never lead a full life. Never see their family again. Tonight, these children dreamt of a red-eyed thief with the body of a beast, come to rip them from their sheets and stifle their screams. Sophie dreamt of princes instead. She arrived at a castle ball thrown in her honor, only to find the hall filled with hundreds of suitors, with no other girls in sight. Here for the first time were boys who deserved her, as she thought as she walked the line. Hair shiny and thick, muscles taut through shirts, skin smooth and tan, beautiful and attentive like princes should be. But just as she came to the one who seemed better than the rest, with brilliant blue eyes and ghostly white hair, the one who felt like happily ever after, a hammer broke through the walls of the room and smashed the princess to shards. Sophie's eyes opened to the morning. The hammer was real. The prince's were not. "Father, if I don't sleep 9 hours, my eyes look swollen." "Everyone's prattling on that you're to be taken this year," said her father, nailing a misshapen bar over her bedroom window, now completely obscured by locks, spikes, and screws. "They tell me to shear your hair, muddy up your face, as if I believe all that fairy tale hogwash. But no one's getting in here tonight, that's for sure." He pounded a deafening crack as an explanation. Sophie rubbed her ears and frowned at her once lovely window, now something you'd see in a witch's den. "Locks? Why didn't anyone think of this before?" "I don't know why they all think it's you," he said, silver hair slick with sweat. If it's goodness that the schoolmaster fellow wants, he'll take Guldina's daughter." Sophie tensed. "Belle? Perfect child, that one is. Brings her father home-cooked lunches at the mill. Gives leftovers to the poor hag in the square." Sophie heard the edge in her father's voice. She had never once cooked a full meal for him, even after her mother died. Naturally, she had good reason. The oil and smoke would clog her pores. But she knew it was a sore point. This didn't mean her father had gone hungry. Instead, she offered him her own favorite foods: mashed beets, broccoli stew, boiled asparagus, steamed spinach. He hadn't ballooned into a blimp like Belle's father, precisely because she hadn't brought him home-cooked lamb fricassee and cheese soufflés at the mill. As for the poor hag in the square, that old crone, despite claiming hunger day after day, was fat. And if Belle had anything to do with it, then she wasn't good at all, but the worst kind of evil. Sophie smiled back at her father. "Just like you just said, it's all hogwash." She slipped out of bed and slammed the bathroom door. She studied her face in the mirror. The rude awakening had taken its toll. Her waist-long hair, the color of spun gold, didn't have its usual sheen. Her jade-green eyes looked faded, her luscious red lips a touch dry. Even the glow of her creamy peach skin had dulled. But still a princess, she thought. Her father couldn't see she was special, but her mother had said, "You're too beautiful for this world, Sophie." She said this with her last breath. Her mother had gone somewhere better now, so would she. Tonight she would be taken into the woods. Tonight she would begin a new life. Tonight she would live out her fairy tale. And now she needed to look the part. To begin, she rubbed fish eggs into her skin, which smelled of dirty feet, but warded off spots. Then she massaged in pumpkin puree, and rinsed with goat's milk, and soaked her face in a mask of melon and turtle egg yolk. As she waited for the mask to dry, Sophie flipped through a storybook and sipped on cucumber juice to keep her skin soft and dewy. She skipped to her favorite part of the story, where the wicked hag is rolled down the hill in a nailed spiked barrel, until all that remains of her is a bracelet she made of little boys' bones. Gazing at the gruesome bracelet, Sophie felt her thoughts drift to cucumbers. Suppose there were no cucumbers in the woods? Suppose other princesses had depleted the supply. No cucumbers! She'd shrivel, she'd wither, she'd... Dried melon flakes fell to the page. She turned to the mirror and saw her brow creased in worry. First ruined sleep, and now wrinkles. At this rate she'd be a hag by afternoon. She relaxed her face and banished thoughts of vegetables. As for the rest of Sophie's beauty routine, it could fill a dozen storybooks. Suffice it to say, it included goose feathers, pickled potato, horse's hooves, cream of cashews, and a vial of cow's blood. 2 hours of rigorous grooming later, she stepped from the house in a breezy pink sparkling glass dress, sparkling glass heels, and hair in an impeccable braid. She had at least one day before the schoolmaster's arrival, and she planned to use each and every minute to remind him why she, and not Belle or Tabitha or Sabrina or any other impostor, should be kidnapped. Sophie's best friend lived in a cemetery. Given her loathing of things grim, grey, and poorly lit, one would expect Sophie to host the visits at her cottage or find a new best friend. Instead, she had climbed to the house atop Graves Hill every day this week, careful to maintain a smile on her face, since that was the point of a good deed after all. To get there, she had to walk nearly a mile from the bright lakeside cottages with green eaves and sun-drenched turrets, towards the gloomy edges of the forest. Sounds of hammering echoed through cottage lanes as she passed fathers boarding up doors, mothers stuffing scarecrows, boys and girls hunched on porches, noses buried in storybooks. The last sight wasn't unusual, for children in Galveston did little besides read their fairy tales. But today Sophie noticed their eyes, wild, frenzied, scouring each page as if their lives depended on it. 4 years ago she had seen the same desperation to avoid the curse, but it wasn't her turn then. The schoolmaster only took those past their 12th year, those who could no longer disguise as children. Now her turn had come. As she slogged up Graves Hill, picnic basket in hand, Sophie felt her thighs burn. Had these climbs thickened her legs? All princes in storybooks had perfect proportions. Thick thighs were unlikely as a hooked nose or big feet. Feeling anxious, Sophie distracted herself by counting her good deeds from the day before. First, she had fed the lake's geese on a blend of lentils and leeks, a natural laxative to offset the cheese thrown by oafish children. She had donated homemade lemonwood face wash to the town orphanage, for she insisted to the befuddled benefactor, proper skin care is the greatest good deed of all. Finally, she had put up a mirror in the church toilet, so people could return to the pews looking their best. Was this enough? Did this compete with baking homemade pies and feeding homeless hags? Her thoughts shifted nervously to cucumbers. Perhaps she should sneak a private supply into the woods. She still had plenty of time to pack before nightfall. But weren't cucumbers heavy? Would the school send footmen? Perhaps she should juice them before she... Where are you going? Sophie turned. Bradley smiled at her with buck teeth and anemically red hair. He lived nowhere near Graves Hill, but made it a habit to stalk her at all hours of the day. "To see a friend," said Sophie. "Why are you friends with the witch?" said Bradley. "She's not a witch. She has no friends, and she's queer. That makes her a witch." Sophie refrained from pointing out that this made Bradley a witch too. Instead, she smiled and reminded him he'd already done her good deed by enduring his presence. "The schoolmaster will take her for evil school, and then you'll need a new friend," he said. "He takes 2 children," said Sophie, jaw tightening. "He'll take Belle for the other. No one's as good as Belle." Sophie's smile evaporated. "But I'll be your new friend," said Radley. "I'm full on friends at the moment," Sophie snapped. Radley turned the color of a raspberry. "Oh, right. I just thought." He bled like a kicked dog. Sophie watched his straggly hair recede down the hill. "Oh, you've really done it now," she thought. "Months of good deeds and forced smiles, and now you've ruined it for runty Radley. Why not make his day? Why not simply answer, 'I'd be honored to have you as a friend'? And give the idiot a moment he'd relived for years." She knew it was the prudent thing to do, since the schoolmaster must be judging her as closely as St. Nicholas on the night before Christmas. But she couldn't do it. She was beautiful. Radley was ugly. Only a villain would delude him. Surely the schoolmaster would understand that. Sophie pulled open the rusty cemetery gates and felt the weeds scratch at her legs. Across the hilltops, mouldy headstones forked haphazardly from dunes of dead leaves, squeezing them between dark tombs and decaying branches. Sophie carefully counted the rows. She had never looked for her mother's grave. Even at the funeral, she wouldn't start today. As she passed the 6th row, she glued her eyes to a weeping birch, and reminded herself where she'd be a day from now. In the middle of the thickest batch of tombs stood one Graves Hill. The house wasn't boarded up or bolted shut like other cottages by the lake, but that didn't make it any more inviting. The steps leading up to the porch glowed mildew green. Dead birches and vines wormed their way around the dark wood and sharply angled roof. Black and thin, loomed like a witch's hat. As she climbed the moaning porch steps, Sophie tried to ignore the smell, a smell of garlic and wet cat, and averted her eyes from the headless birds sprinkled around, no doubt victims of the latter. She knocked on the door and prepared for a fight. "Go away," came the gruff voice. "That's no way to speak to your best friend," Sophie cooed. "You're not my best friend." "Who is, then?" Sophie asked, wondering if Belle had somehow made her way to Graves Hill. "None of your business." Sophie took a deep breath. She didn't want another Radley incident. "We had such a good time yesterday, Agatha. I thought we'd do it again." "You dyed my hair orange!" "But we fixed it, didn't we?" "You always test your creams and potions on me, just to see how they work." "Isn't that what friends are for?" said Sophie. "To help each other. I'll never be as pretty as you." Sophie tried to find something nice to say. She took too long and heard the shoes stomp away. "That doesn't mean we can't be friends," Sophie called. A familiar cat, bald and wrinkled, growled at her across the porch. She whipped back to the door. "I brought biscuits." Shoestep stopped. "Real ones or ones you made?" Sophie shrank from the slinking cat. "Fluffy and buttery, just like you love." The cat hissed. "Agatha, let me in!" "You'll say I smell." "You don't smell." "Then why did you say it last time?" "Because you smelled last time." "Agatha, the cat's spitting." "Maybe it smells ulterior motives." The cat bared claws. "Agatha, open the door!" It pounced at her face. Sophie screamed. A hand stabbed down between them and swatted the cat down. Sophie looked up. "Reaper round at a bird," said Agatha. Her hideous dome of black hair looked like it was coated in oil. Her hulking black dress, shapeless as a potato sack, couldn't hide the freakishly pale skin and jutting bones. Ladybug eyes bulged from her sunken face. "I thought we'd go for a walk," said Sophie. Agatha leaned against the door. "I'm still trying to figure out why you're friends with me." Because you're sweet and funny," said Sophie. "My mother says I'm bitter and grumpy," said Agatha, "so one of you is lying." She reached into Sophie's basket and pulled back a napkin, revealing with dry, butterless bran biscuits. Agatha gave Sophie a withering stare and retreated into the house. "So we can't take a walk?" asked Sophie. Agatha started to close the door, and then she saw her crestfallen face. Excuse me just a minute, I need a drink. Today's read is sponsored by Freeway Lemonade. Freeway Cola, available at Little's. As if Sophie had looked forward to their walk as much as she had. A short one. Agatha trudged past her. "But if you say anything smug, or stuck up, or shallow, I'll have Reaper follow you home." Sophie ran after her. "But then I can't talk." After 4 years, the dreaded 11th night of the 11th month had arrived. In late-day sun, the square had become a hive of preparation for the schoolmaster's arrival. Men sharpened swords, set traps, plotted the night's guard. My women lined up children and went to work. Handsome one had their hair lopped off, teeth blackened, clothes shredded to rags. Homely ones were scrubbed, swathed in bright colors, and fitted with veils. Mothers begged their best behaved children to curse or kick their sisters. The worst were bribed to pray in the church, while the rest in the line were led in choruses of the village's anthem, "Blessed are the ordinary." The air swelled into a contagious fog. In a dim alley, the butcher and the blacksmith traded storybooks for clues to save their sons. Beneath the crooked clock tower, 2 sisters listened to fairy tale villains' names to hunt for patterns. A group of boys chained their bodies together. A few girls hid on the school roof. A masked child jumped from the bushes to spook his mother, earning a spanking on the spot. Even the homeless hag got into the act, hopping before a meager fire, croaking, "Burn the storybooks! Burn them all!" But no one listened, and no books were burned. Agatha gawped at all of this in disbelief. How can a whole town believe in fairy tales? Because they're real? Agatha stopped walking. "You can't actually believe the legend is true." "Of course I do," said Sophie. "The schoolmaster kidnaps 2 children, takes them to the school where one learns good and one learns evil, and they graduate into fairy tales." "Sounds about right. Tell me if you see an oven." "Why, I want to put my head in it." "And what, pray tell, do they teach you at the school exactly?" "Well, in the school for good, they teach boys and girls like me how to become heroes and princesses, how to rule kingdoms justly, how to find happily ever after. And in the school for evil, they teach you how to become wicked witches, humpback trolls, and how to lay curses and cast evil spells." "Evil spells?" Agatha cackled. "Who came up with this? A 4-year-old?" "Agatha, the proof's in the storybooks. You can see some of the missing children in the drawings. Jack, Rose, Rapunzel, they all got their own tales." "I don't see anything, because I don't read dumb storybooks." "Then why is there a stack beside your bed?" asked Sophie. Agatha scowled. "Look, who's to say the books are even real? Maybe it's a bookseller's prank. Maybe it's the elder's way to keep children out of the woods. Whatever the explanation, the schoolmaster isn't. It isn't a schoolmaster, and it isn't evil spells." "So who kidnaps the children?" "No one. Every 4 years, 2 idiots sneak into the woods, hoping to scare their parents, only to get lost or eaten by wolves." And there you have it. The legend continues. "That's the stupidest explanation I've ever heard." "I don't think I'm the stupid one here," said Agatha. There's something about being called stupid that set Sophie's blood aflame. "You're just scared," she said. "Right," Agatha laughed. "And why would I be scared? Because you know you're coming with me." Agatha stopped laughing, and her gaze moved past Sophie into the square. The villagers were staring at them like the solution to a mystery. Good in pink, evil in black, the schoolmaster's perfect pair. Frozen still, Agatha watched as dozens of scared eyes bored into her. This was her first thought, that after tomorrow she and Sophie would take their walks in peace. Next to her, Sophie watched the children memorize her face in case it appeared in their storybooks one day. Her first thought was whether they looked at Belle the same way. Then through the crowd they saw her, head shaved, dressed filthy. Belle kneeled in the dirt, frantically muddying her own face. Sophie drew a breath, for Belle was just like the others. She wanted a mundane marriage to a man who would grow fat and lazy and demanding. She wanted the monotonous days of cooking, cleaning, sewing. She wanted to shovel dung and milk sheep and slaughter squealing pigs. She wanted to rot in Galveston until her skin was liver spotted, her teeth fell out. The schoolmaster would never take Belle, because Belle wasn't a princess. She was nothing. Victorious, Sophie beamed back at the pathetic villagers and basked in their scares like shiny mirrors. "Let's go," said Agatha. Sophie turned. Agatha's eyes were locked on the mob. Where? Away from people. As the sun weakened into a red orb, the two girls, one beautiful, one ugly, sat side by side on the shore of the lake. Sophie packed cucumbers in a silk pouch, while Agatha flicked lit matches into the water. After the 10th match, Sophie threw her a look. "It relaxes me," said Agatha. Sophie tried to make room for the last cucumber. Why would someone like Belle want to stay here? Who would choose this over a fairy tale? And who would choose to leave their family forever? Agatha snorted. "Except me, you mean." They fell silent. "Do you ever wonder where your father went?" asked Sophie. "I told you. He left after I was born. But where would he go? We're surrounded by woods. To suddenly disappear like that?" Sophie spun. "Maybe he found a way into the stories. Maybe he found a magic portal. He's waiting for you on the other side. Or maybe he went back to his wife and pretended I never happened, and died 10 years ago in a mill accident." Sophie bit her lip and went back to cucumbers. "Your mother's never at home when I visit." "She goes into town now," said Agatha. "Not enough patients at the house. Probably the location." "I'm sure that's it," said Sophie, knowing that no one would trust Agatha's mother to treat a diaper rash, let alone illness. "I don't think graveyards make people all that comfortable." "Graveyards have their benefits," said Agatha. No nosy neighbors, no drop-in salesmen, no fishy friends bearing face masks and diet cookies, telling you you're going to evil school in magic fairyland. She flicked a match with relish. Sophie put down her cucumber. "So I'm fishy now? Who asked you to show up? I was perfectly fine alone. You always let me in." "Because you always seem so lonely," said Agatha. "I felt sorry for you." "Sorry for me?" Sophie's eyes flashed. "You're lucky that someone would come and see you when no one else will. You're lucky that someone like me would be your friend. You're lucky that someone like me is such a good person." "I knew it!" Agatha flared. "I'm your good deed. Just a pawn in your stupid fantasy." Sophie didn't say anything for a long time. "Maybe I became a friend to impress the schoolmaster," she confessed finally. "But there's more to it now." "Because I found you out," Agatha grumbled. "Because I like you." Agatha turned to her. "No one here understands me," said Sophie, looking at her hands. "But you do. You see who I am. And that's why I kept coming back. You're not my good deed anymore, Agatha." Sophie gazed up at her. "You're my friend." Agatha's neck flushed red. "What's wrong?" Sophie frowned. Agatha hunched into her dress. "It's just, not used to friends." Sophie smiled and took her hand. "Well, now we'll be friends at our new school." I say, to sink to your intelligence level and pretend to believe in all of this. Why am I going to the villain school? Why has everyone elected me the mistress of evil? No one says you're evil, sighed Sophie. You're just different. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Different how? Well, for starters, you only wear black, because it doesn't get dirty. You don't ever leave your house. People don't look at me there. For the Create a Tale competition, your story ended up with Snow White getting eaten by vultures and Cinderella drowning herself in a tub. I thought it was a better ending. You gave me a dead frog for my birthday, to remind you we all die and end up rotting underground, eaten by maggots, so we should enjoy our birthdays while we have them. I found it thoughtful. Agatha, you dressed as a bride for Halloween. Weddings are scary. Sophie gaped at her. Fine, so I'm a little different, Agatha glared. So what? Sophie hesitated. Well, it's just in fairy tales, different usually turns out, evil. So you're saying I'm going to turn out a grand witch, said Agatha, hurt. I'm saying whatever happens, you'll have a choice, Sophie said gently. Both of us will choose how our fairy tales end. Agatha said nothing for a while, and then she touched Sophie's hand. Why do you want to leave here so badly? That you believe in stories you know aren't true. Sophie met Agatha's big, sincere eyes. For the first time she let tides of doubt in. Because I can't live here, said Sophie, her voice catching. I can't live an ordinary life. Funny, said Agatha. That's why I like you. Sophie smiled. Because you can't either? Because you make me feel ordinary, said Agatha. And that's the only thing I've ever wanted. The tenor-tolled clock sang in the darkly in the valley. 6 or 7, for they had lost track of time, and as the echoes faded into a buzz of the distant square, both Sophie and Agatha made a wish that one day from now they'd still be in the company of the other, wherever that was. And that's the end of chapter 2. Well, that's the end of chapter 1. In a couple days' time, if everybody likes this video, I will post chapter 2. Okay? Laters!